Good evening, thank you for coming. So this meeting was, this is not a scheduled meeting, as you might have seen in the budget calendar. This is something that, we decided to schedule to give the public an opportunity to ask questions. This is really an informational meeting, that's how we intended this. To ask questions, you'll have enough opportunity to provide feedback. There will be more community meetings on the budget itself down the line before November. The board is going to go through a half-day budget session on the 18th, and then after that the staff will go back, come back with a new version of the budget, and we're going to have public meetings, and then eventually by November, right, Kate, we will be deciding on the budget. So there is going to be enough time. So please treat this as an opportunity to ask questions. You may have seen the August 7th and 14th budget presentations on the website. Those two presentations were for the board, both on capital projects as well as the operating budgets. So I'm not going to go into detail on those slides. I think this is important. Hello?
It should still pick you up.
It should. Okay, good. So anyway, please keep it. I'm sorry?
You hold it down here.
Hold it down here?
Well, below rather than in front.
Okay, got it. Okay. So let's keep it interactive, right? Ask the questions while we're on the slides. You're able to hear?
Yeah.
Okay, great. One important thing I wanted to make sure people understand is that no decisions have been made. Nothing. You might read about things. None of this is, has been decided. So all comments, feedback will be welcome. Please provide that. So the good news is that, the upshot, the headline is that if we approve the budget as it stands today, as proposed by the staff, you're going to get, a lower assessment this year. Last year it was $692. If we approve it as it is today, it will be $678. So that's really good news. But I will talk about some of that, how we got there as we go on. I just want to take us back to 2017, how we started the year and where we are today. For 2017, at the end of 2016, the board approved a budget that included revenue, objective of about 17.7 million, and the operating expense budget was about 15.4 million. So overall, on a net basis, netting out the revenues, the costs, the expenses, the assessment from an operational perspective should have been 720, but we ended up transferring the operating surplus from 2016 into 2017, and that lowered the assessment to 692. So that's where we were at the beginning of the year. So where are we today? The anticipated actuals based on, this is end of July financials, is about 17.5 million in revenues. If you followed the treasurer's report that I think I made, and this was in the June report or July. I think that was the July board meeting. I did say that we will be coming in lower from a revenue perspective, and it looks like we will be lower by about 160,000 at least. That's what we are tracking to today. But the good thing again is that from an expense perspective, we've been much lower as well. So we are likely to finish about $380,000 lower than what was initially expected in the beginning of the year. So essentially finishing at 15, right? So the net effect of that is, while RA on a net basis was expected to spend 692 of our assessment dollars, in effect it would have spent at the end of the year only about $681. So that's one way of looking at it. So this year, how did we get into this budget? So 2018, right? Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? What drove the lower spending?
We will get to that. Across the board, many of the departments, things were actually lower. We'll see that table that will show you where we had the lower spending. So broadly getting into 2018, our goal to staff, to Kate and the staff, was that, we don't want the assessments to go up. In fact, we actually want them to come down as much as possible. So that was one challenge. The second challenge was, right with the new board sitting in the middle of this year, the second challenge was that, starting from now till the end of 2018, can we get at least 5% of costs out of the budget, right? And we will be tracking, even if we went just to the 678, we will be tracking to over 5% from a cost reduction perspective, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We also did a little bit more deeper dive, looked at, the areas that could see some cuts. Legal fees, something that jumped out. This has been a matter of public discussion a lot, and you might have been a part of it as well. Compensation and benefits, this comes up every now and then, so that's the second area. And the third one is, the overarching overheads, administrative expenses, those kinds of things. What can we, from an operational perspective, optimize and take out of that? And you will see some examples of that. In fact, I'll talk to that. On the flip side, for revenues, we were going to look at, how can we increase the non-assessment revenues? So we are, luckily for us, we've had continued growth from a number of member households perspective. You'll see that in the next slide. But what can we do about non-assessment revenues? Can we, challenge the various departments to see if we can increase those revenues, and that will be captured as well. So the key changes as a result of that, the budget that we got from the staff on the 14th will essentially capture most of these changes. You're going to see higher revenues. All of the items that I talked about in terms of compensation benefits have all been addressed. The proposal is to increase the employee share of healthcare, in health insurance. It's rising from 5% to 10%. They're going to continue to look at that, look at benchmarks, and so there's going to be continued effort to look at that from a market perspective. Second, retirement benefits. So that's also going to be lower even as proposed by the staff. And the third thing that the staff has been toying with is, instead of dealing with annual increases, can we look at merit-based performance as one way to compensate people that are performing very well? So in this budget, there is also an allocation for a merit-based pool within the budget that you can use to reward the people that are performing, and not just stick to a standardized increase. Other expenses, legal fees, we'll go into that in one of the next slides. And so this is a table that gives you the actuals going back to 2014, and you have a comparison of the 2018 proposed budget, right? So I've not, for 2017 and 18 alone, you will actually see what that means in terms of core household, each of those items. So again, these are the broad revenue items. This is, again, budgeted revenues versus historical actuals, right? So land use, because of easements, you'll see that we never had revenues there, but now because of easements as well as new development coming in, right, you're going to see, or at least the expectation is that you're going to see profits, so that's the difference. But I'll go into that in more detail in the next slide, but the one takeaway here is you will see that the revenues have been increasing continuously. In 2014 it was 15.9, and it's all the way up to 17.5 now, and next year it's supposed to touch about 18 million. That's the projection. There is an anomaly here in 2015, which is the 2.2, which is, that's really the Comstock profit that was booked. That revenue was booked in that year, so that's why you see that. Any questions on this slide? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, where's the assessment part of this? I'm lost.
The assessment is not in this, but
So
I didn't show that.
Non-assessment revenues of that much?
Which one?
It's in finance and IT.
I'm sorry?
The assessments in finance and IT.
Oh, you're asking about assessment. That's always in
It's
finance.
in there, okay,
Yes.
yeah, I was
Yes.
wondering how we got to 15.
So the revenues that you see here is all there. It's all coming in finance and IT.
Yeah, thank you.
The rest of it is all non-assessment.
Understood.
Good question. It's a very good question. I should have mentioned that. But you can see the member households. One takeaway here again is that, you can see that in 2014 we had 20,326. Now we are up to 20,668, and that continues to rise. So this one is a little bit more exploded view, just mainly comparing 2017, where we are and where we expect to go in 2018. So you see you're going to have a growth of about 429 homes. I believe it is Sakis Homes, right? Okay. Or maybe-
Sakis as well as the Vine, which is just
Okay.
adjacent from us at Reston Heights.
Okay. So we are clearly getting more people, and from a staff perspective, they will continue to focus as the new developments come in terms of bringing them into the RA4. So hopefully that's going to continue to increase. But other than that, I also talked about higher revenues, non-assessment, and here you will see, like again, this is assessment. So beyond that, you will see that the challenges are there for communications, for example. In the previous slide, you'll see that it was pretty minimal in the early years, but in the last 2 years, it started ramping up. And so they've been challenged to increase it even more. So that's, going to go from 98,000 to about, or at least projected to go to 300,000. Lake House, this year, for 2017, we are projected to get to about 143 by the end of the year. So next year, the challenge there is to take them up to 229,000. So that's the revenue objective for Lake House. Likewise, you're going to see land use, again, proffers and, easement income that we are beginning to see. So all that is driving approximately about 500,000 in terms of revenue increase between what we expect to actualize in 2017 versus what we are projecting for 2018. And that in effect will have an impact equal to about $9 from an assessment perspective. So because the revenues are going up, RA can afford to lower the assessment by that amount. So that's the net effect. Any questions on this? Okay. So the next one is a similar layout, except in this case it's really about the cost. So again, you can see that historical actuals are laid out side by side with 2017 and 2018. Again, you will see that the expenses, operating expenses. This is only the operating expenses, by the way, not the capital expenditures. So you can see the operating expenses are going up on a year-by-year basis. Normalized increases. Almost all of them are. Some staffing increases, healthcare premiums have been going up. That's gone up to just between 2010 and 2016 by about 36%. Right. So you're seeing a cascading impact of those kinds of marginal cost increases flowing throughout this time period. Right. So going back to an exploded view. So 2017, the initial projection was 15.4 overall number. Now we're down to 15.4. Right. So this is here, Mike, to your question. You can see the changes. Land use came down from 22 to 18, and likewise, whereas if you see recreation services, that went up, and mostly it is due to Lake House and some marginal other cost increases. So you see that most of them come pretty much the same. Administration and HR clearly optimized, right? They reduce costs from an office equipment, supplies, all of that. You're going to see that flowing through into next year. So that's what is leading to a lower cost, from a 2017 perspective. So 2018, we talked about legal fees, right? It is expected to be lower. It's going to be lower across the board. Legal fees are being charged, up and down all of the different departments, and you're going to see the hiring of an in-house counsel, having an impact across the board because that person is going to be doing the work. Recreation services is going to go up between this year and next, primarily because of Lake House. As I said, health insurance premiums did go up this year, so you're seeing that. But at the same time, the net result is going to be lower because employees are going to pay more of it. But overall, holding the expenses at the same level will lower the net effect on the assessments will be about $11. So lower than last year, all things being equal. Any questions on this? Carol? No? All right. I saw question marks, so I thought I'd ask you. Okay, so this is, again, a different way of looking at it by department, right? So maintenance, environmental management, it's really CSF, Central Services Facilities. They do all the maintenance work, all of the different facilities. You go to the RA website, you'll see how much we manage, right, as Reston Association. So their operating costs about 26%, and recreation, again, is the biggest service that we provide. And as you can imagine, that's the second highest, pretty close. Finance and IT, a lot of the business operations, the nuts and bolts, the guts, really resides inside that, and so you can see that. Community engagement, 7%, and rest of them are, administration, HR. That looks like a big number, 12%, but that includes the building lease, the operational expenses related to the building itself. So that's booked under that as well. But this is how it splits. Questions on this? Next slide. Okay, good. So this is where I'm showing the major expense changes. So you've got a couple of items that are going up, and substantial number of them actually coming down. Legal, the savings we're going to see next year is going to be 325,000, across the different departments, and that really is significant, as you can imagine. You look at maintenance, there's going to be some expense reduction there, covenants, but two of the places where you're going to see substantial reduction will be finance and information technology, because now we are going to outsource a lot of the work. We are bringing some of them in-house and lower the cost. Cellular plants, devices, office operations, maintenance supplies, across the board, all of these are going to see more and more reduction compared with this year. That's what you're going to see. These two are going up. The capital projects particularly is important, because one of the things that we didn't have before 2017 was a capital projects department by itself, which now exists. We did have one person there, I think, in the previous years, but it really became a big department this year, because we want to implement the capital projects, estimate the costs, implement them. We needed to have strong oversight on that, and as part of that, there's increased focus on getting good, professional and technical support, and that's what is driving some of that cost. Communications, community engagement, it's really, marginal adjustments to salaries and related costs. Any questions here?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes. Yeah.
One with regards to the legal costs. Does that savings take into consideration employee benefits of now going to be full-time employees? That's one question.
There is an estimate built in, yes.
So that does take into consideration employee benefits?
Yes. The next slide, in fact, we have it here, right here. This one shows the actual dollar value of the different, items, right? So you can see that the full-time base salaries are coming down. The 401k, I talked about retirement benefit changes, so you see that it's coming down from 7% to 5%, or at least that is the proposal, right? So you also see health insurance, the net decrease that I talked about with the employee share going up. But the new position is right here, in-house legal, 175,000.
But is that because employee benefits across the board are being lowered? So if you just consider legal as a line item, would you in net consider that savings from just that line item, or is it because across the board employee benefits are being used?
No, 325 is pure legal fees that we today pay outside to external law firms. All the different departments use outside counsel today for all the legal needs. So that 325,000 savings is all actual invoices that we get from outside. That's what we expect to save. Obviously, this number is not set in stone because we haven't hired anybody, right? We're also, the staff, the team is also in the process of evaluating other external counsel providers. So they are going through an interview process right now. They're down selecting to a few, and so we might get a better deal there as well. And so the 325,000 may actually be higher, right? So this is based upon last year's invoices.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, Robert.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Basically, if you go back to the previous slide,
Yeah.
to answer your question, so you're having a decrease in legal costs from our external legal vendors by 335, kind of across all the departments. And then if you forward to the next slide, so we're replacing that with a internal legal person, and that's not very good. What's missing there is just a little bit of salaries and benefits, but there's a net savings overall.
Net savings of 325K.
325.
So 325 is not the total invoices, it's actually more.
Oh,
The
yeah,
net
total
is-
invoices are much, much higher. This is the projected savings because if you go to the August 14 meeting, there is a slide that shows where we expect to get the savings from an in-house, by having an in-house counsel as opposed to going outside for all of those different activities. I'll take you to that at the end of this. Any more questions on this slide? Okay, good. So this is what it looks like on a net basis, right? Based on the proposed, operating as well as capital budgets. We haven't talked about that as yet, but on a net basis, the operating expenses will add up to about 11.3 after you take into account the non-assessment revenues. You take that out, and this is what you're left with. Now, this is what we would use as a basis to fund the operating expenses, and the 540 calculation that you see is based upon the per household, the 21,097 that you saw in one of the previous slides. It's that number times this is basically with that to this. So this is the current estimate. Well, this may change marginally here and there with the final analysis when we get down to it next year, but this is what the assessment is based upon. The second one, repair and replacement reserve fund, based upon a 2014 reserve study, RA is supposed to fund 10% every year of a rolling 10-year cost of replacement of the different assets. That's what the 2014 study did. So this year, per the reserve study, and I'll talk about that in the capital budgets slide as well. Per the reserve study, right, we were supposed to reinvest about 2.5 million. But a lot of that was based on cost estimates that were done in 2014. But with the new capital projects team inside, there's a lot of re-estimation of those costs. So some of them have gone up marginally, some of them have been pushed out. One or two of them have been brought forward. So this is the net total number for this year that's being proposed by the staff is 2.9 million. We will not be spending as much this is the reserve fund set aside. That doesn't mean we spend it. This will just go into that fund. So all of that adds up to 14.3 million, which gets us to the $678 on a per household from an assessment perspective. Any questions? Yes, Scott.
What's the line item for board considerations? I see you don't have anything in there this year, but there was $9 last year.
Yeah, last year. This year we've left it aside till we get through the board work session. So in the August 14 meeting, the presentation, right, you will see that in the backup, you will see like 5-6 slides containing a lot of different member suggestions that came in. Mm-hmm. And so those slides, and it's right at the back, I can show it to you at the end. So the assessment impact of each of those items, if we were to do it, right, are all there. But the board hasn't yet focused on that. We really want to focus on the main items first, and then we can look at that. But that, of course, that $9, of course, was the final result. That's what was approved. We're not yet there at that point.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm not going to talk about pool hours in this because we just had a big meeting at the lake house. This was on Saturday, right? So that's something that we can talk about if we need to. I'm sure Kate and Robert can help with that as well. But one of the things I wanted to focus on today was, the lake house from two perspectives. One is operations. Second is from a loan payoff perspective. So from an operational perspective, we have some key decisions to make. The budgeted revenue for last year, for this year, I keep saying last year, sorry, for 2017 was about 300,000, right? But in reality, we've seen that there's been some challenges from a schedule perspective, take-up perspective, and so we the rebudgeted number is about 143,000, right? For next year, it's about 230,000 based upon what we are seeing now. And the 230,000 projected for next year is really based upon maintaining what we are doing today, as it exists today. The programming that includes, whether it is after school or yoga or any of those kinds of activities. Plus, you have the actual rental income coming in from corporate rentals and parties and things like that, right? So that combination, as it exists today, is 230,000. Expenses, excluding the interest on the loan, because let's set that aside for a second. Just from a pure operational perspective, the next year is expected to be about $340,000, leaving us a deficit of about 110, right, which we need to fund. Which is one of the items that's actually pushing up. If you saw in one of the tables I showed, the recreational services, the cost of that was going up primarily because of this, plus the interest costs, of course. So the key decisions that we have to make is, first of all, do we change the hours of operation, right? So that we give ourselves more opportunity to make money, right? Should we change the programming mix? Because one of the things that we've observed is that rentals tend to fetch a lot more money than programming. At least that's the way it is today. Maybe with lots of marketing that might change, but that's where we are today, right? And so should we, as a board, we have to make a decision, and this is where the public can also provide really good feedback, is should we just go to a switch to an all-rental model as soon as it is practicable, right? In order to make sure that we make as much money as we can so that we can fully get a payback on the investment. So that's a critical question that we really have to address. So any questions, comments on this? Okay. That being none, the next one is really the loan payoff, right? So today we took out a loan of 2.65 million to get this, to fund the acquisition of this property, right? And the annual interest payment is about $182,796. In fact, interest and principal repayments. The interest itself last year worked out to a little over 80,000. That will marginally decrease as you go over a period of time. But effectively what we have is, this loan will come due in 2025. In July 2025, we'll have to pay 1.57 million or refinance it. How will we pay it? From the reserves if we want to do it, or of course through refinancing. So some useful things to keep in mind is that we've not fallen below 4 million in operating reserves for a very, very long period of time, at any point in time. So our peak will probably be about 12 million. Like for example, I think last year was, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, was between 11.5 and 12, right? This is, usually by the end of March, we have collected, and this is a great position. Coming from a subscription business, I can tell you collecting so much cash in advance is an excellent cash flow business. So we have typically that much money sitting in the operating fund. But all of that are current funds, current short-term funds that we might need at any point in time, because our monthly operating spend is about 1.25 million. Monthly cash spend, actual cash spend, right? So that's where we'll end up. So we've now gone below 4 million, right? So the question is, what do we do, right? We're not making a whole lot of money, from the reserve fund, right? 4 million going up to 11 or 12. Should we be doing something else with it? Should we invest in the market, chasing higher returns, or should we use that money, idle money, to pay off the loan? So this is a question that, as a board, we need to address. We need to get some feedback from, love to get comments from the public as well. And so what you're going to get is, if you don't have other projects for which, you need to borrow money, right? And you don't have other loans that are higher cost, what is the best use of this money? Is really the question, right? Something for us to think about. But paying off the loan will lower the assessments from 678 to about 671. So, sorry, 669. 669 immediately. So it's essentially a pass through to the members, right? It's use of money to pay back the members for the next 10-year period. So you're going to see that payback, which is a good thing. So that's what we are confronted with. Any questions, comments on this?
Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by paying off the loan? Are you talking about paying off the 1.57? Or are you talking about paying off
All of it.
all of it, whatever is remaining?
All of it, I think it's about 2.4 or thereabouts.
At the end of the year, it'll be about, it's around about 2.4 million.
Yeah. So we pay that off
Pay that off from the reserve funds.
from the reserve fund.
So at some point though, when things settle, it is going to dip below 4 million.
It will dip below 4 million,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
So, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Follow up on that.
Yeah.
Is if you're taking money from reserve funds to pay off a loan, all these revenues that are going to come in the following years from Lake House operation,
Mhm.
I think it was 143 this year, are you going to put that back in the reserve fund?
No, that will stay in the operations. That will stay to fund the Lake House operations.
Why not? I mean,
If you look at Lake
So-
House as a standalone business, right? So 143,000 revenues will be used to fund the Lake House operations. The deficit will have to be covered.
so
Out of
the 320 or something you had in operating expenses, that did not include any loan payments or any.
I backed it up because that's a financing decision that's up to us to make. This is typical in corporate finance. You try to back out. You back out the interest costs, the financing costs, and just look at the operations to see how they stand on their own. And then because you can make
So it's
financing.
an operating loss of,
It is an operating loss of
110K.
110,000 for this year.
okay,
Yeah.
and so all those,
For 2018, sorry. Yeah.
is there any benefit, or will you comment on why or why not will you put those money back in the reserve funds? Those revenues?
You cannot put it back in its revenue. It is an revenues typically flow into the operating funds. So to the extent that you don't, you won't be drawing from the operating.
I understand, it's also not normal to use reserve funds, for example, to pay off a loan. So similarly, will you not try to credit back into the reserve funds, whatever revenues you're getting?
This is an when we say operating reserve, it's actual cash sitting in the bank just to fund the day-to-day operations. That's what these reserves are. The other reserves are the RRR fund. It's about 8.5 to 9 million. That is completely separate. That's what funds the capital fund. That's the real capital, reserve fund. This is just operating funds that's accumulated over a period of time because of operating surpluses on an annual basis. So we have 500,000 that will get added to the operating reserves. 500,000 in operating surplus. That's the way, it's all just operating funds. But I'll come back to that. Mike, yes?
Sridhar, I like this idea, and I've always felt that our operating reserves are too high. But do you have a sense of where you think, and I'm not a financial guy, so that's just a gut reaction. Do you have a sense of what kind of the optimal amount is for it? We need to have something in there, but not $4 million.
Yeah, given that you're getting cash so far in advance from the members, I think the risk is pretty low. You can, if you're not, let's say 1 year you're collecting only 50% of the assessments as opposed to the 90+% that we collect well before March. Beginning of March, you've collected about 90+%, right? So suppose you're getting only 50%. You've still collected 50% of the 14 or 15 million in assessment revenues. It's already coming. You booked it. You've got the cash, right? And so if you had 2 million, you still have 7 million and enough runway to start ramping down the operations. So you've got 6 months to start ramping things down. It'll go a long way. And within that time, you can bump up this 50-60% to a 75%, and you extend your runway a lot more, and to resize, right? Resize your operation. So there is, from a cash flow perspective, I'm pretty comfortable because the nature of the business is such that you're collecting so much cash in advance.
And you
before the
don't
bills become due.
have- you don't have to pay the whole thing all at
You
once.
don't
You
have
just
to
wanted to
pay-
take $1 million out of, could you, or is there a
If you-
prepayment penalty? How does it work?
So unless you restructure, which typically comes with the cost, right?
Yeah.
You're still going to have this balloon payment in 2025. So you're keeping some money, continuing to keep some money idle in the, in the operating reserve, right? But it's just sitting there. You see how much it made. The 4 to 12 million, all of it made 59,000 in 2016. Our investment policy requires that almost all of that money stay in short-term investments, because this is operating, this is day-to-day cash, right? You have to match the cash flow requirements, right? So if it's going to sit in, with the interest rates being where it is today, right, you're going to continue to make as little as that. Why, that's something, unless we change the investment policy and start putting the money in riskier, investment stocks and other funds that are more long-term investment oriented, which is something that, we really have to think carefully about, because we lose $1 million because the market went south. We all know how bad it's going to be. Second thing to consider, if you're going to refinance, we have to think about what the interest cost will be in 2025. We are at, unparalleled low level of interest rate today. I can guarantee that it's not going to be this year, 2025. So you have to take all those factors into consideration, and if we are willing to, as a board and if the public, that's what they want, then we need to, we should think hard about changing the investment policy and diverting the money to riskier investments. But remember, the spread has to be substantially higher, because the same 1.57, I know I'm going into too much financial detail, but if the interest rate is going to be, instead of 3.35 that we have today, 3.35%, it's going to be even double that. Your spread on top of that, given that you're going to do it at the time, has to be much, much higher. You should have made a lot more money from out of that. So, which is, you're going into hedge fund territory. You really are. Hedge fund type of return to make on top of this. So something to consider. Happy to have a longer discussion on this at some point. But this is the proposal, at least to consider. This is not in the budget today, by the way. This is just a thought. Yes, Karen?
Based on things you're saying, when Ari bought Lake House, I kind of thought they would be using reserve funds to do the purchase, because it was such an out-of-the-box kind of thing, unexpected. So if you had been treasurer at that time, would you have recommended that, or, based on the stuff that...
If I were to recommend the investment itself, right, then I would have certainly considered the reserve fund as an option to finance. If I had been the treasurer, yes, I would have certainly thought about it. Obviously, you have to look at the price, you have to look at the business plan, all of those things. But yes, absolutely, I would have certainly thought about it. And I'm sure they did too. I'm sure, the then board, Kate, and, they all, I'm sure they considered it, and well, I can't speak for that.
We have rather recommended to run the other way.
I'm sorry? No,
Rather than use reserve funds or assessments, we have rather recommended to run the other way.
it's price. It's always, it comes down to what are the terms and whether you like it or not. If it makes sense, you do it. And so I was an outsider, so I don't know that. So anyway, here we are, capital projects. That's the next section. So the proposed spending for this year overall, item by item, is about 2.85 million, including a 4% contingency that's being built in. This is going to fund a total of 63 projects, right? You're going to have small ones, big ones. But the big thing I know a lot of people always worry about is this does not, it does not include Hook Road. There's nothing on Hook Road. Nothing will happen. No decisions have been made. Nothing will happen till the working group has finished its study. So you will not see anything about Hook Road in 2018, unless the board decides that we want to insert some item with regards to that. Pony Barn is another issue that's come up. That's in 2017. In fact, the budget was allocated a couple of years back for that. So if the board does decide to do something about Pony Barn, that will come out of the it's not, won't have an impact on the 2018 budget. It's not listed for that. The money has already been set aside for that. The big thing that will happen in 2017 is the central services facility, the renovation, and that's again a 2017 item. It's already set aside $1.5 million for that. We are in the middle of the contracting process for that. Any questions on this? Yes.
I do have a follow-up question on the lake house.
Uh-huh.
So far, until now, we've been using money from assessments to make the interest and principal payments to the bank. Is that correct?
No, we've been using the 650,000, right?
Okay,
For the profit
so
money.
probably because this is so in the recent past, that's why we haven't. But if you were not to pay this from reserves, you would have used the plan always was to use money from assessments
Yeah.
to pay.
Everything has an impact on assessment
Okay.
because you have it in.
Sure, I understand. My
Yeah.
question is your savings on the assessment, considering that is your savings
Right.
in your previous slides where you show revenue and expenses, is the
Right.
savings in the assessment considering that the loan will be paid off from the reserve funds?
No. That's why I thought I was clear. The budget does not include loan payoff at all. So the interest and principal replacement cost of 182,796.95, I think, is baked into the budget. So if we take it out, if we pay off the loan, then your assessment dollars will come up by about 8.66. So right now the budget includes, it's everything continues as though it is. It is in 2017. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, so this is, any questions on this? Okay. So this is the list. This is the list of items. This is again this headline. There is some detail underneath each of these. I've left out one or two items out of this, just because they were pretty small. They were 15,000 or 13,000, those kinds of items. But effectively, this is the spending we're going to see. Swimming pools, buildings and actual pools, tennis courts. Mostly it's about color coding and lighting, those kinds of things. If you have any specific questions on this, I'll be happy to address them. Any specific item? Anyone? Anything? Yes, sir.
The $500,000 on lakes, ponds, and dams, is that only dredging, or is that actual work?
One second. I believe most of it is Lake Narrow dredging, and there's one maintenance, spillway maintenance in, I don't know which place, but Lake Narrow dredging is really the biggest item, about $499,000.
$400,000 for Lake Road?
$499, say $500.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions on this?
These are all items that are necessary.
Yeah,
They're
these are,
not
yes.
factoring in the other board considerations.
No. This is all necessary. I mean, it's basically things like, and it's available in the capital projects, section of the website, so you can see the detail. It's just too big to throw into a slide presentation, but you'll see that it's things like, asphalt trails, billing and collection software, which is really going to be a saving for us ultimately, baseball fields, lots of pools, just basic things, color coding and fence, garden plot irrigation, those kinds of costs. Yes, ma'am.
In this listing, is there something where there are little improvements, hopefully for the nature center? I know that there was a trip to the nature center
I
recently.
think that falls under other board considerations.
There
These are
was
the things-
something.
Other board considerations,
Oh.
which he had a 0 before, because they haven't considered them yet.
Oh, okay,
I think that's the way it's written.
Maybe not this year. Kate,
He should answer.
okay.
yeah, for this year, I think it's in 2019, right? Or is it this year?
No, that was, as Carol correctly stated, the nature center items are for other board consideration.
Okay.
So that's something that you'll need to look at, but we priced them out, so we know what they.
That's not there in this list that I have. Yeah. I know there are some other things going on with Friends of Reston as well, doing some of those changes, and so I think we've not yet got to a decision point on what it would look like. Any other questions? Okay, good. So the key decision points on the, starting from the 18th, as a board, we're going to be looking at just the overall budget. We hope to do a deep dive, a little bit more than what we are doing, even more than what we're doing today. Will be ultimately all that cascades into the assessment rate. Pool hours, we didn't talk about it today, but we just had a big meeting, like I said, so that's something that, we need to think about, because that has an impact. Even if we marginally, if we change some of what we had this year, increase some hours, it's going to go up by about $4.50. And if we go back to, the full schedule, it will probably be much higher than that. So just things to take into consideration. Lake House loan, the capital projects, we tend to go through item by item and, kick the tires. We've already kicked the tires. There's actually more road testing, so to speak, I guess. And then ultimately we'll decide as part of it, the reserve appropriation as well, which is $2.9 million, which equates to about $138 in terms of assessments per household. So that's where we are from a, and schedule. I already told you by middle of October we'll have a more refined budget, which ultimately we'll be voting on, and by November we should have it. So following this, it's really the departmental budgets that the presentation was made on August 14th. I wasn't going to walk through this, but if you have any specific questions on any of the departments, I can try to address it. Robert and Kate can also do that, and so we can. Any questions on this? I'm going to show this. So this is, I want to go back to while people are thinking about questions, the in-house counsel, right? So these are the areas that we expect that we will, the in-house counsel will be able to help, that today is being done by the external counsel, right? Whether it's, corporate and board matters or, covenants and land use to some extent at least. So we're trying to get somebody that has pretty good familiarity with, across, all these different areas, and at least guide, right? May not be able to do all the work, but at least take a lot of it in-house. And that's what, we are hopeful will be to the $325,000 in terms of savings. And Colin, you had a question on something that I wanted to show you. Now, this is the member suggestions. These were the types of suggestions that we received, and some of them are a little bit more, if we really want to do it, it may be practical, I guess. But you can see that the staff has attached some down on the streets of that map. None of this is, we have not tested it, I have not tested it, but these are things that we'll definitely look at. Some of these things we're already doing in some form or fashion, like you see legal counsel, for example, obtain in-house legal counsel, right? So those are things that we're already doing, right? You will see some items like that. And this is available on the website anytime you want to see it. So that's all I have, unless you have questions. Yes?
So, getting back to the lake house. If it's a 2.4 million total payout approximately, but what would have been the total principal plus interest for the term of the loan? You have that number in that slide?
I have it somewhere else if you...
I've got some of that number as well.
Yeah, why don't you...
So basically on the life of the loan, you're paying about $700,000
in
interest. I believe it's 728,000.
How much?
728,000.
Sounds about right, yeah.
So 728 plus 2.4 million is
Plus
what you pay.
2.65. Plus
So the
2.65.
total interest of the life of the loan is about
728,000. I believe that's the number. I was gonna pull out my laptop because I have it in my laptop.
Hey, Robert, does that include the initial write-down of the 650, whatever remained there? Because that was restricted funding, right? I mean, that was tied to that lake house, so the initial,
No, that
No,
700,000 is pure interest.
It is.
Pure
but no,
interest
but
on the loan.
if you decide to pay it off, a chunk can come out, that 650, whatever's left will go towards the payoff, right?
The 650 is over.
Those funds are pretty much depleted already.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay.
There, that's basically been used up to fund the operating deficit,
Yeah.
right? So that's what you weren't here, I think, when I was
Yeah.
showing the revenue numbers. So that was booked as revenue under recreation services in 2015, and it was in the lake house account, and it's been drawn down to fund the operating deficit on a monthly basis. So that money is pretty much used up. That's not set aside to repay the loan. That wasn't how it was set up. But does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this will all be fresh cash that we've used to pay off from the operating reserves. But ultimately, it all goes into the same kitty, right? You throw the 650 into the operating reserves, or you put it in the lake house loan. You're still funding the operating deficit of lake house, and if you did that, whether it's from this source or that source, still net it's the same thing. Unless you set it aside purely to repay the loan, that's a different thing, but that's not how this was booked. Question? Any more? So many, okay. All right. I think we're at the end of it. Any comments? Kate? Sherry? Since you're here?
Sure, do you have the budget calendar?
Yeah. I'll show you in one second.
While Sridhar is looking for that, the board will be meeting on Monday, and it will be live streamed. They have a meeting from 1 to 5 here at Reston Association. Set aside a nice chunk of time during the day so that they're awake and fresh and it's not at night. But they will be going over, there's some definite decision points staff are looking for. Some of them were mentioned here this evening, so we look forward to getting some guidance from the board on kind of as we try to build the second draft of the budget on some of these. So we're looking at both capital and operating budgets, and there will be some, again, hopefully some guidance given so that we can get ready for some more community input. There are a couple more sessions coming up. There is a meeting on October the 15th for a community meeting on the budget, as well as we had noted there that there was maybe some budget discussion on the 28th of September, but at the moment in time, there's nothing incorporated unless the board so chooses on the 18th.
It's more right. I would say that, the 28th is, members can still come and comment, provide feedback as part of the member comments period. So at least, our goal was, 14th we had this meeting, now we have information. Please ask away more questions if you have them, and then provide feedback, right? There's going to be a lot of opportunity to do that.
And when do you need a vote on the assessment?
On November the 16th is the deadline, so there'll be a couple public hearings in addition to the 15th. We'll also be presenting to the board on the 15th. There are already a couple of dates earmarked. October 30th sticks in my mind, as well as October 26th or 27th at a board meeting. So I'll just double check that. But we will get that posted, and we want to get the board's concurrence with those possible public hearing dates. Yes, 26th and also the 15th would be another opportunity as they get closer to kind of the final number to get public input.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think a few of us here tonight were kind of just, we had the opportunity just to speak in support of a project that we're in favor of for the budget. So which of those meetings would it make most sense to
I would say starting
express in front
from
of the public that the importance of this particular project?
maybe starting from the work session to I mean, obviously you can do it today as well, but we're not, this is more informational,
Yeah.
like I said earlier. At least that's how I visualized it. So I would start from the 18th, definitely the board meeting as well. You can, as you know, as always, you can provide some comments, but between that, you know, if you email it to us, to the board, to Kate and to, you know, to me or others, I think.
Can we get a hint of what they're interested in?
I'm sorry?
Maybe can we get a hint tonight of what they're...
Oh, sure. We have time. Actually, we are well ahead of time. Why don't, yeah, what are you interested in?
Well,
Let's
yes,
talk about it.
I'm
Here.
president of Friends of Reston.
Yeah.
We are constantly fundraising, but it has, you know, become very apparent at Nature House, which Friends of Reston fundraised to build, and now belongs to Reston Association. It's become very apparent over the past few years that the parking area has deteriorated considerably, and people coming and going in the evening, it is so dark out there, as Reston is, and we appreciate that darkness. But right at the entrance, where the gravel turns into sidewalk and people are walking into their cars, it's impossible to see. So let's studied a few years ago what would be the best options for repairing the surface, for adding 2 more lights. And also, because we were hearing feedback from people, or input from people, you know, in wheelchairs with strollers, et cetera, that there's a disconnect in reaching the trail. So we would like to improve the accessibility on the property. And we got an estimate of what those costs would be. It's about $76,000. Friends of Reston has done enough fundraising over the past few years that they would contribute $50,000, more than 2/3 toward that project, about 2/3. So we want to make sure the board was very aware that we're contributing, Friends of Reston. It is private money, you know, from generous donors in Reston and beyond that have provided this money to Friends of Reston, and this is what we see fit to spend it on, so that for thousands and thousands of people that visit Nature Center every year, that they'll be able to do so in comfort, and that the parking lot won't be destroyed because of snow removals right now is impossible, and the drainage is poor, all of that sort of stuff. So there are definitely reasons for it. So,
No, as a board, we are pretty engaged in that process because we were, in fact, a good number of us were there last Saturday.
Right, yes, thank you
You're
for
probably
thank
familiar
you
with
for
that,
going
and
see
so
what
we've
we're talking about.
gone over these numbers. We're very appreciative of the model of, you know, Friends of Western contributing $50,000, you know, to that and to the cost. And maybe we need to, as Sherry was saying that day, you know, we need to implement that across the board for so many different projects. So, but with that aside, you know, but that's a really good thing. So we definitely have all that, you know, that's something that we will be talking about. So, but please come and speak up at these meetings, and it's something that we definitely recognize.
It is a major
Something
asset
that
of Reston
is- yeah, it is.
Association, so let's keep it that way.
Yeah, and it's an accessibility issue. I was here representing the Reston Accessibility Committee, as you know, Sridhar.
Yes, I know.
RCA.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're working to improve access to facilities in Reston for people with disabilities. And the situation with the parking lot at the Nature Center is a huge issue for people who use wheelchairs or have mobility impairments. It's very hard to get to and from. And there's currently only one accessible parking space in the lot there. And my understanding, if the lot is repaved and striped, then they would add an additional APS, which, yeah, that APS is often being used currently, so having an additional one would certainly be very useful. And having the lights there would be useful for people with visual impairments getting to and from the
I
facility
have
at
no
night.
visual impairment.
But, yeah, I mean, this is...
A lot of evening meetings,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And meetings
Yeah.
and
And
public
the,
activities.
right, and the trailhead is an important one, because the trail was designed to be ADA compliant as a moderate difficulty trail, which is great if you can get to it, but you can't get to it because the trailhead is not ADA accessible, so if you can't access the trail, you can't use it, so, yeah.
Yeah, no, all good points, and we did have an extensive conversation on that last Saturday, so it will be good to get the whole board as well as the public to hear that as well, so please come, please speak about that. Anything else? Any other ideas? Yes, Mike?
Are there any pool houses that are slated for renovations?
Yeah, Lake Toro.
Like the Rose House?
Lake Toro, it's already started, in fact, and we will see there's some spending this year on that. this year's spending on Lakeville Road should be about, that's just 2018, yeah, overall it's about, 300 something, and part of it is for Lakeville, the total for this year. I think it's 109,000, but it's going to go into next year, obviously, this is not a 5-6 month project, so it'll run into next year and the following year.
Yes.
So there's some spending this year, there's some spending next year.
Are those mapped out, like, can I tell when, say, Red Newport's going to be done? And when some other housing?
I don't have it, but I'm sure the website may have it, or Kate or Garrett Skinner, the capital projects guy.
We'll make sure we get you kind of our plan for the next at least 5 years.
I'll follow up.
You got it, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk to a little bit about the reserve funds or assessments, all these monies that we have? How do we invest them? What do we invest them? Are there any returns? Is there, could you just give a summary of that?
Sure. I have to get my laptop for that, but if you have it.
If you don't have it ready, I don't want to take everyone's time. but-
No, that's ready.
I can speak to that a little bit if you like. So, reserve funds as such. We were talking about, you were saying that these current operating funds don't go currently below $4 million, right, over the last couple of years. I actually pulled everything up over the graph over the last 2 years, and the graph basically shows money being coming in at the beginning of the year, so money's going up, and then as the year goes by, the money's get used up throughout the year, and then the assessment comes around the next year, so you see like a graph going like that. None of that in the last 3 years has actually gone below $4 million. So now you ask yourself, okay, so what's that $4 million doing there? That's money built up over time. Part of it is, and it depends on how you look at what is a safe amount of money to have in reserve. Some folks say X amount of months average expenditure, and that's it's about, you mentioned a number earlier, it's about $1.2, $1.3 million a month on average that we spend. The majority of our spending is obviously in the summer. Once all our programs are here, we put all our seasonal folks here. So as Sridhar mentioned earlier, a lot of the money gets up front, received at the beginning of the year, and then the majority of the spending is actually in the middle of the year. So from a timing perspective and a cash flow perspective, paying off the loan, your previous question, there's not really a risk we're going to run out of money from a cash flow perspective. The other thing to also remember is if we miss the budget, or just on the expenditure side, let's say we save 1% of a $15.4 million budget. That means we have added to a surplus $150,000. So you do that a few years, and suddenly you've got $1 million going around. The other thing to remember is part of that money, some of it's always received in advance. The last couple of years, we've received more than $1 million in advance of the next year, because the assessments get sent out at the beginning of December, and then a lot of people actually receive that, and they don't wait to pay it, they pay it immediately. So last year, it's been between $1.5 million and $2 million received in the year for the next year's assessment. So that's part of your operating cash. So now investments, as Sridhar mentioned, a lot of our money per our policy is in more liquid type investments, so it's basically in money market accounts. We do have a certain amount.
About 2.8 million.
Yes, about 2.8 now.
It's about 2.8 in mutual funds, out of the reserve fund, the capital reserve fund. So 2016, to your question about the return, the money that we made, taking into account the unrealized gains and losses, right, as well as the actual interest and dividends. On the mutual fund investment, which was 2.6 at the end of last year, we made about 350,000. But that's on the reserve fund, except for the capital reserve fund, not the operating reserve, which is not invested in in these kinds of long-term assets.
And where does that 360 go? Does that go back into your revenues in your, in your?
No, it should stay.
It goes
within
back
that
in the
fund.
reserve
It
fund?
stays inside the same fund. You can't move it from back to that. Because there's no transfer back from here to the operating fund.
Is there a way to give a number on the interest, return, on the investment, return?
On
the
which?
2.8 million, for example?
On the 2.2, yeah, I told you, 3,000.
Yeah.
It includes interest and dividends of about 118, I think. Yeah, it includes interest and dividends as well as, other kinds of, returns because there are bond funds and things like that. So it's about 350.
And a lot of that, also to remember, because it's in bonds and the stock market, is unrealized. So it fluctuates up and down, and you don't effectively must account for it as if it's in the books. It's basically on the balance sheet.
Yeah,
So,
you just get that report at the end of the year.
Yeah.
You're not actually collecting money. So if you look at the remaining part of the capital reserve fund, I told you it was close to 8 million, I believe, last year. 2.6 plus, I think 6.43 was remaining.
correct. It's around the 10.
So that, a lot of that is sitting in just, short term, not in mutual funds. So the overall return last year was, from that, was only very minimal. It was 21,000.
So for
it's not-
1 year, it was 21,000 for investing 2.8 million.
Yeah, no, for the remaining made about 21,000. So overall interest income last year was 80,000. 59,000 of that came from the operating reserve fund investments. Remaining 21,000 came from the capital reserve funds. So they're all invested separately. They are separate funds, separate accounts. Robert can speak in more detail to that, but that's, so the point is that, we're really not making a whole lot of money from that.
Question is, we didn't make 360,000 off 2.8 million in 1 year, did we? We
It
didn't
was for
make,
last year.
in 1 year,
No, 250 is.
So basically
because that's 12% return.
so
That's,
That would be crazy to,
so in
that's a great return. I would love that 12% on that.
So it's more of a life-to-date number we're looking at. There was about, before my time, Schwab accounts were open, and there was 2.5 million invested in Schwab, all this money.
Oh, that's
in
okay.
mutual funds. Now, the life-to-date return on that is what Sridhar quoted was about $300,000. That's what it's built up from
That's right.
2014.
I see that.
Now, a good thing to remember, last year, in 2016, we had a good year. I can't remember exactly the amount of growth that it had, but in the prior year, we actually made a loss because of the market. So, that's the risk of investing. 1 year it's going up, and, the life today right now is great. But, some years we actually made a loss. It actually went below the 2.5 million originally invested, or went down to 2.4 something.
But that's typical of, even for example, our 401ks, which goes up and down. And for example, I'm going to pay over 30 years of my home mortgage, I'm going to pay twice of what the principal is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I take money out of my 401k and pay it off. I'm trying to reason it in that manner. Because if it goes up and down, I still grow the money over a longer period of time. Like you see, we have 12% since 2014. So that's if I say 4% a year we made, that's still more than the 3% that my mortgage is, for example. So net, it may be a wash, or that's what I'm saying.
But the 4% is not guaranteed, right?
I understand that, but you have to look over a period of time.
If that loses 20% of value, just because the market went south on you, right? We have to go back to the members and tell them we lost $1 million or $2 million in the market.
But that's how we are investing today anyways. I mean, I'm not saying do anything new. I'm saying we are only looking at what we're doing today. We put 2.8 million and we got 360K over 3 years.
Over a period of time, yeah.
Yeah.
1.5, we're putting 2.5.
2.5. But it's time soon
Yeah.
for the association to look at it, do another risk analysis
Uh-huh.
for investments, to look at the investment policy since it's been put in place since 2014. Take a look at it. It's time. to do that.
And I think to the optics of it, just the optics of like, being able to say to someone, we're proposing an increase in our assessment while you have, reserves that are invested
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not being able to be liquidated, I think like the optics are what we have to be careful of.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
It's
yeah.
like you can't, it's hard to hear that the association will have reserves and I'm getting a bigger assessment in my mailbox.
Yeah. I mean, see, those are the questions, right? I mean, if you have reserves in the operating fund, right, what is the best use of it? I don't know if you were there when I was talking about that. That's the decision that the board, the members, we have to collectively get comfortable with, what's the best use of that cash, right? And match it with the cash flow requirements itself, duration matching, right? So
Yeah, I understand that, but like,
You
you
understand
have
that, yeah.
people that aren't here.
I know,
that,
I'm happy that's why this
that-
meeting.
Right.
I'm happy to get on the soapbox and talk about that anytime, yeah. And help people come to, some comfort level, whichever way the decision should go. But it's essentially we return the capital to the people or we invest it, act like a mutual fund or a portfolio manager, take members' money and become a portfolio manager, invest in the markets because we know better than other portfolio companies. Is that what we are saying, right? Those are the questions that, we need to be really asking ourselves, and I'm sure I'm being facetious when I say that, acting like a portfolio manager, but that's effectively, you take public money and put it in the market.
That's what you're doing.
People
I mean, you're not asking for anything new, you're doing that anyways today. But also, why collect further assessments or the reserve funds part of assessments from people when it's already bloated, right? We already have excess reserve funds.
This is not bloated. If you see the reserve fund this year, we are going to be spending about 2.85 million, right? We'll be putting in 2.9. Last year, it was a different amount, right? Next year, we'll be spending about 4 million. Or at least that's what we think, 2019 capital project, estimate. But we won't be, what the reserve funding does on an annual basis is to smoothen, the money that we take in terms of assessment, because we don't want 1 year for the assessments to go up by $30, $40, suddenly, because that year we're going to spend 4 million on capital projects, right? So there are two separate things, how much we spend on an annual basis versus how much we draw by way of assessments. So having 8 million is not, it's basically 2 years of reserve in funding that's available to fund 2 years of projects, right? So unless you top it up, that 8 million will vanish in 2 years, effectively. And if we have some major problem, how are you going to go back in mid-year and try to get assessment? We have one of these hurricanes or tornadoes or some disaster.
Right, so based on just the point you just made, would it make sense to keep reserve funds for anything like that rather than pay off a loan that, because in this case we have been able to obtain financing from a bank. There are going to be many other things for which we will not be able to obtain financing from a bank, for many other type of expenditures that are really emergency type, where reserve funds will come into play.
Insurance is one of the things that helps cover
Go ahead.
major events, things,
Yeah.
we do have insurance that helps.
Yeah, we do have
protect
insurance
them,
for
too.
that, but yeah, but.
If anything, it's just the opposite. By paying off this loan,
Mhm.
we increase our borrowing capacity. We open that back up again.
That's
I mean, banks will loan us so much money. And by paying this off, and there's a measurement there. The banks will say to you, okay, you can borrow this much based on your income,
Yep.
based on your assets. And they'll say, okay, you can borrow this much. And we have reduced that by 2.8 million. We pay it off, that effective creditworthiness comes back to us, so that it's available
If we need to borrow more.
the lake gets blown out again by a hurricane, as happened in, what year was it, 78? Lake Audubon got blown out, it was then Lake Ilsa. That would have happened again, we'd be able to look at special assessments and look at bank loans in order to get the money to rebuild that dam. So there's a good argument to be made for increasing your capital
Borrowing
capacity
capacity, yeah.
or your borrowing capacity.
And that's why we also have dam insurance. So,
We do, right?
for the dams, that is.
Only the dams. okay.
Dam insurance for them.
I'm sure we have insurance. I was just using that as an example, but yeah. Any more questions?
Just another quick comment, just on the reserves, if you look at the monthly financials, you'll see that there's a lot of funds in, or millions of dollars within the triple RF, but the other thing to remember is a lot of that is already allocated to current projects as well as carry forward projects, so that is effectively like encumbered. So it's set aside in a way to spend on the current year list projects. So it's not just like they're ready for new projects, it's also part of the current projects.
If there were not excess reserve funds, more than what was really necessary, we would not be talking about using those funds for paying off.
Different funding pots we're talking
Different
about.
pots, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, are you talking about reserve, the capital reserve or the operating reserves?
So there's two different.
No, was it, when you talk about funding, right?
Well, both of those funds, both of those reserves are excess as of right now.
The operating reserves, surpluses add up over a period of time, and that's why we have what we have, and so this is,
So
the
let's
question there
clarify
is
the lake house we're planning to pay from which reserve?
operating reserve, which is 4 million, which is the one that I was saying that has never dipped below. So every month, the money that we use to pay the bills really comes out of that pool, the accounts that reside within that pool, right? So the capital projects will come out of this other reserve fund. So they are two separate. So this one has 4 million, rises up to 12, approximately 11.5 to 12 by March, because we've got the collections. But you're basically writing checks, wiring money on a monthly basis. So that keeps depleting and gets down to that. And the reason why you have the 4 million that's accumulated over a period of time is because of the operating surpluses. That goes back to that. And so so the question is, what do we do with that money now that it's reached that level? Last year, the surplus was used to reduce the assessments, which is, from a corporate finance, a great way to return the capital to the shareholders, right? And it's the same concept here. So last year it was used to lower the assessments. Are we going to do the same by paying off the loan, because that in effect is a net transfer back to the members? Or do we want to invest in something else and try to get higher return? So that's really
So we are not using the car for the ARF that we call to pay off?
No, we don't.
No.
We cannot.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
We cannot do that. The charter is very different. It's not for using for these kinds of expenses. At least that's what I understand, right, Kate? Yeah. We cannot touch that money for these kinds of expenses.
For capital.
Yeah.
Just by.
You could.
I mean, you can, yeah, and then
You've already do it once, but you should.
Yeah. Can you get a question on that? John? You've been quiet, you had no questions?
Thank you, Sridhar, for this session. This was very informative.
Yeah, very well.
You feeling okay, Judge?
Good.
That's a great presentation. Thank you.